My name is Ted Williams. I work for an engineering firm, and I met your dad through work at S.P. Kramer and Associates. I met Ken at S.P. Kramer when he came on board in 1993, and he left Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife after 30 some odd years and went in the private sector. And I helped support him in his projects that he ran out of Eastern Oregon. It was a very trying time trying to teach Ken how to use a computer. So just to get him to turn it on and boot up was a major accomplishment. 1993 and telecommuting was really a chore because as we're in this digital age, back then it was all deal with dial-up and you couldn't transfer files very large. So it was really a struggle to be efficient back in those days of working together so far apart because, he was basically 5.5 hours away. My name is Ted Williams, and I used to work with Ken Whitty from 1993 at S.P. Kramer and Associates. My first experience of a trip with your dad was when he lined up a jet boat trip up the Snake River with the state police. And we got to go up there for 3 days. And the bet was first fish, most fish, and the biggest fish. And since it was my first steelhead fishing trip, he thought he could get all 3. Well, needless to say, I took 2 out of 3, and he's never talked to me since. I caught the biggest, and I caught the most. I think we tied for the most, so it was really a tie. First horseback trip that I went with Ken was actually my first horseback trip, which we went out of Wallala Lake. And it was just going to be an hour or 2 ride. And I made the mistake of saying, does this trail open up so that you can see anything? Well, 7 hours later, we got back to the truck and I couldn't walk. So that's how I learned how to ride a horse. Sandals is a myth. You never, as a true horseman, you never wear sandals unless you're from the city. And I think he was more embarrassed that I was wearing sandals than I was. It didn't bother me one bit at all. Our trips with the Whittys, Ken and Carolyn, have been to the U.S. Virgin Islands twice, and they actually came to our wedding where we got married in St. John's. We've been to Cozumel, Mexico, and last year we went to Cook Islands down in the South Pacific. There's a lot of vivid memories of going with Ken and Carolyn on trips. One, they are very laid back, do anything. I've also learned that no matter where you go in the world, you can't take a cowboy out of a person. So I still have memory of Ken wearing Bermuda shorts and cowboy boots in the South Pacific that I will never get out of my mind. The first time we went to the Caribbean, we got to experience local rum that was brewed down in the St. Croix, which is part of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I think we both have been hooked ever since. And this past weekend when we visit them, we had 2 bottles that we bought with us to make sure that we weren't going to run out of rum. In my first marriage, Ken and Carolyn also came down for the wedding along with Tina. And they helped out getting the wedding prepared. And I remember pretty well that your mom spilled wine all over her dress. And she was so ashamed that she had red wine on her dress. And I said it was perfect, that they were welcome at any time, under any circumstances, and they're part of our family, and they always will be. The thing I most appreciate about Ken and Carolyn is they take you in like family, they treat you like one of their own. You will never get a bullshit answer. They're always straight to the point, even if it's not what you want to hear. And both have a sense of humor, and ribbing goes both ways, which helps the friendship grow. I like wearing sandals because they're comfortable, and obviously sandals don't mix in the country setting that the Whittys have grown up in. But then again, I've also learned just because you wear cowboy boots, you can't kick a horse without breaking your toes. So Ken found that out all by himself. Our love for basketball goes not only through Ken but also Carolyn because of her coaching background. And there was quite a few years in a row that we would go to the Oregon State playoffs for single A in Pendleton and watched the state playoff games. And those were fond years, and we'd go not rooting for a certain team, but just enjoy the experience of watching games and gleaming the knowledge of basketball, and being able to share knowledge was also a benefit of going to those games. When I think of Ken and Carolyn, I really feel that they are an extended family. And I don't know how many times on our trips overseas that people thought that they were my parents. And they've never treated me like a child. They've treated me like an equal. And we get along extremely well, and it's a friendship that'll last forever for me. The uniqueness of their relationship is that each has their own personality, and their stubbornness can be a very strong trait within them, but their camaraderie and fondness is very unique, and they really need each other, and they rely on each other. Even though they might take separate vacations, they do need each other. Carolyn likes to do parades with mules, and luckily I have a wife that's very supportive that allows me to be on the sidelines as my wife partakes in the parades. And last year we got to visit the Whitties, and the parade was a New Orleans based theme, or Kentucky Derby based theme, and all the girls dressed up in bright dresses and actually won Best in Show that year for the parade. Ken is really good on the job in his experience and how he can relate that experience to others so that they understand without getting too technically jarvey. And a layperson, which I was because I didn't have a fish background, I was able to understand in his way of putting things that a lot of knowledgeable people in the industry wouldn't be able to relate to the common person. I actually got to experience a trip up the Snake for 3 days in a jet boat, where we put in Lewiston, Idaho, and spent 3 days on the river staying in Forest Service cabins. And the state police were checking for elk tags while we fished. And that was my first experience of fishing with Ken. And that was my first experience of it falling into the Snake River by myself. There's been plenty of firsts with Ken that I can't list, and I have a feeling there'll be plenty of firsts in my future with Ken too. I learned early on with Ken's expertise that there are certain things in his life that you don't question. You just follow the instructions that are given to you, because if you do deviate from his instructions, you will hear it.